The hot topic right now in the NBA is tanking. Some NBA teams clearly just aren't trying to win, and the league is basically rewarding them for that. That's called tanking, and depending on who you ask, it's either a smart team building or ruining the NBA. In my personal opinion, it's a little bit of both. Today, I want to break down what tanking really is, why teams do it, and how the league could actually fix it. For those of you who don't know, tanking is essentially when a team intentionally loses games to improve their draft lottery odds. Teams will rest veterans and star players just to lose games, just to improve their draft lottery odds by just a few percentage. So why do teams do this? Well, the problem with tanking is that it actually works. We've seen teams throughout history, and especially more lately, tank and see success from tanking. Without tanking, the Spurs wouldn't have Victor Wembanyama. Without tanking, the Pistons wouldn't be the 1 seed. It works. So to further explain why teams do it, I want to take my favorite team as an example, the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz are a very small market team. No free agent is choosing to sign with the Utah Jazz. That's just plain and simple. That's just how it is. Nobody is signing in Utah. You can either draft a superstar and hold them down for 4 years and then get them back in restricted free agents so you can have them for like 8 years. So you can either draft a superstar or you can just be middle of the pack forever. And a lot of the time, teams will prioritize being bad for a few years so they have that chance to draft a superstar. And the truth is, superstars really do just change your franchise. Look at Victor Wembanyama. He changed the Spurs franchise overnight. How I look at it is, if being terrible gives you a better chance to land a superstar, then why ever try to be average? You look at teams like the Chicago Bulls, who have been stuck in the play-in tournament for years and years, and they refuse to just tank, and they've been stuck in that pinnacle of mediocrity because they haven't been able to draft superstars. Now you have teams that I mentioned before, like the Spurs and the Pistons, who are now at the... Now you have teams like the Spurs and the Pistons who now are at near the top of their conference. The Pistons are the top of their conference because they bottomed out for a few years and tanked. And that's even with the Pistons falling to 5 in countless years. All they needed was that one superstar in Cade Cunningham and a little bit of time for development. We can just look through the teams in the standings right now. I'll pull them up. We'll start with the West. Thunder were able, through great management, they were able to get Shea through the Paul George trade and able to get a bunch of picks that made it so they didn't have to tank as much, but they still did. They tanked and were able to acquire Chet Holmgren through tanking, who is now a key piece in their core. They were able to get Jalen Williams and Shea with the Paul George trade, and now they're one of the most successful organizations in the league and are probably the favorites to go back-to-back in the NBA. You have the 2 seed, the Spurs, who obviously were able to net Victor Wembanyama. They got Stephon Castle, they got Dylan Harper, and they were able to trade for De'Aaron Fox now using assets that they got. Just in a few years, they've solidified themselves from one of the bottom teams in the NBA into an absolute contender. The Nuggets got Jokic with in the second round, so we'll just discount that for a little bit, but we have the Rockets. Rockets were able to tank, get resources to trade for Kevin Durant, and able to bring in great players like Amen Thompson and Alperen Şengün. Lakers got handed Luka Doncic on a silver platter because the Lakers and they have everyone signed to them, so that's not really relevant. But the Timberwolves, they were able to tank, get Anthony Edwards, get assets to trade for Rudy Gobert, and they've been a very competent organization over the past few years. You look in the Eastern Conference, the Pistons, like I just talked about, tanking year after year, worst team. Like just 2 years ago, the Pistons had the worst record, one of the worst records in NBA history, the worst start in NBA history. They had the worst losing streak in NBA history, and now look at them, they're 41-13, one of the most successful teams in the NBA, led by Cade Cunningham, who they drafted #1 overall. The Celtics never quite had to go into tanking because through trades, they were able to let the Brooklyn Nets tank for them and net them players like Jaylen Brown. They're also a bigger franchise, bring in some good free agents. They're able to make smart moves. The Cavs tanked. They got players like Darius Garland, who they've recently just traded for James Harden. Got players like Evan Mobley. They were able to make moves for Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen and become one of the most competent organizations in the East. Well, the Knicks haven't netted the greatest picks of all time through tanking. They were able to net RJ Barrett, who they were able to flip for OG Anunoby, take a lot of their picks, assets that they had, and trade them for Mikal Bridges. They were able to sign Jalen Brunson to a super cheap extension, and they're able to become a very competent team. You look at the Raptors were able to get Scotty Barnes with the 4th overall pick. While since their championship run, they haven't always been at the top of the lottery. They've been in that range and been able to draft players that have been impactful for the team and have helped propel them to where they are now. You look at the Philadelphia 76ers, the team that is probably the pinnacle of tanking in NBA history. The trust the process era that netted them Ben Simmons, which unfortunately didn't work out, Markelle Fultz, which unfortunately didn't work out, and Joel Embiid. They were able to flip Ben Simmons to get James Harden. They were able to tank also, get Tyrese Maxey, who wasn't at the top of the top, but they were able to net him with a lower pick, get VJ Edgecombe. Their team looks great. They have a bright future ahead of them, along with having a good presence because of tanking. Let's take a look at the bottom of the East 2 years ago. 15th seed was the Detroit Pistons, who are now, just 2 years later, the best team in the league. Now, record-wise at least. The Wizards, while they still are at the bottom, they have a lot of intriguing young pieces, and being able to net someone like Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansta, Cameron Boozer makes them a very competent organization. They also just made trades for Trae Young and Anthony Davis, and I think next year they're looking to maybe not compete, but at least fight for a playoff spot. The Hornets have been on the up and up. They won 15 straight games or whatever. They've been looking a lot better recently. They were able to tank, get Concanable, who has been one of the best rookies this year. He looks fantastic. They've had a super good rookie class this entire year. You look at the Raptors, who are the 5 seed, who were the 12th seed just 2 years ago. We look at the Western Conference. We have 15th seed, which was the Portland Trailblazers. Now they have great intriguing young pieces. They have Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clingan, Jaden Sharp, Denny Avdia, who was an all-star this year. They got Dame back, Drew Holiday. They look like they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot this year and continue to be a good team. The Spurs were the 14th seed. You look at them now. They got Wemby, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, De'Aaron Fox. They're looking fantastic now. I believe this was the year the Grizzlies went through like the most injury-riddled season of all time, and they recently just traded Jaren Jackson Jr. to the Jazz to start the tank for them. In the 12th seed, we have the Jazz. This was near the start of their rebuild, and for these first few years, they started off really good, and then they started just pulling their stars, pulling out Larry Market and pulling out their players so they could start losing more games. Unfortunately, they weren't able to net top picks through this, but in this last year, they did end up getting Ace Bailey, who looks to be a promising young player. In the 11th seed, we have the Rockets, who now have Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun's an all-star, Amen Thompson looks like a future all-star. Tanking works in the NBA, and that's why it's a problem. Now, why is tanking a problem? A lot of people think, including myself, that's just smart for team building. As a fan, you have something to look forward to, rather than just being in the play-in every single year. But at the same time, it hurts competition. Fans are paying money to go and watch these stars play, and then when they come in, they pay their money, they save up their money so they can go to an NBA game. Let's say, like me, their favorite team is the Utah Jazz. They fork over their hard-earned money to come watch Larry Markkinen or Keontae George and Jaren Jackson Jr., and all three of those players are either just not playing or they're being pulled out in the fourth quarter so we can lose games. And that really hurts competition. Fans come to watch effort. They come to watch players try their hardest. They don't come to watch development. Like, young players in the league learn more losing habits. I don't think any player in the NBA wants to lose on purpose. I think a lot of players understand the concept of tanking. They know why it happens, but no player in the NBA genuinely wants to lose their game for their team to get a better pick. They don't care about their team getting a better pick. They want more touches, you know? You have like Will Hardy, who's the coach of the Utah Jazz, who is, in my opinion, one of the best coaches in the NBA, but he's going to get judged unfairly just because he hasn't had the roster around him, or he's been pulling out his best players so we can lose games. What this means is you see a lot of teams March, April, resting all their players. You get random players popping out of nowhere, dropping crazy games, and you're like, oh, this player could be something, and then come next year, they're not even in the NBA, because games in March and April truly don't matter, because half the teams in the NBA are trying to lose games. At the end of the day, tanking creates a cycle where being bad is better than being average, and that's a problem. Another commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, recently informed the NBA that he's looking into changes to try and fix tanking. Adam Silver's already looked at this in the past. That's why we have the flattened odds. You used to have a 25% chance at the first overall pick. Now it's a 14% chance. But Shams recently tweeted out a whole bunch of possible solutions, and I want to go over these possible solutions and whether, in my opinion, they're good or not. So the first solution, let me read this here. It says, Shams, first solution, let me read this here. First round picks can be protected only top 4 or top 14 plus. This one, to me, I don't think it really affects the NBA negatively at all, but at the same time, I don't think this is going to curb tanking at all. I think this is sort of just meh. Another solution that Shams tweeted out is lottery odds freeze at the trade deadline or later date, and I absolutely hate this one. This will not eliminate tanking. What it is going to do is it's going to incentivize teams to tank earlier in the year. Those March and April games, those games are going to be the games that matter. Nobody's going to be caring about the early in the NBA games, and starting off the season with tanking is just absolutely horrible. I think that's worse than it already is. I absolutely would hate this potential change. This change is one that I have been advocating for. No longer allowing teams to pick top 4 in consecutive years and or after consecutive bottom 3 finishes. And I think this is a good change that they could implement. If a team has been bottom 5 team or whatever in their respective conference for the past 3 years, then don't let them get a top 5 pick. Like, incentivize teams to try and improve, try and get better. And I think this is a good way to go about it, where teams still get good picks, but they're not stuck being the worst team in the league year after year after year after year, unless you have an incompetent franchise like the Sacramento Kings. That's not a shot, but it's unfortunately kind of the truth. Another one, teams can't pick top 4 the year after making the conference finals. I don't think this stops tanking at all. I actually don't understand this one at all. I mean, I think this one's just basically saying, oh, we don't want the Pacers to get a lottery pick. Another solution says lottery odds are allocated based on 2-year records. And this one's interesting. I think this one would actually do really well at help stopping tanking, but I think it could also be bad for teams like the Chicago Bulls or the Memphis Grizzlies, who this year are fully committing to the tank, and they're not going to be able to get a good pick because their lottery odds are based on the past few years, especially a team like the Pacers. They were in the conference finals last year, one of the best teams in the East, and with injuries to Tyrese Halliburton, losing Miles Turner, they're like, you know what, this year we're going to go all and get a top pick to pair along Tyrese Halliburton, and that just doesn't work for them anymore if it was based on 2-year records, which does eliminate tanking in that aspect. But I don't know how much I like this. I'd be indifferent. I'm indifferent to this one. I think it would help tanking, but I think there's also negative aspects that come along with this one as well. Lottery odds are extended to include all play-in teams. I think this one does help eliminate tanking a little bit. I think it does incentivize the play-in more than it is. Teams like the Chicago Bulls, Atlanta Hawks are going to be jumping up and down if this change was made. But I do think this would help reduce tanking. I think you would see a lot of teams at the end of the year, though, they're neck and neck about to make the playoffs, and they're like, we're just going to get swept in the first round anyways. Let's lose some games so we can get in the play-in and get that 1% odd of getting Darren Peterson or whatever. And the final one that Shams talked about is flatten the lottery odds for all teams. And, I mean, that would fix tanking. At the end of the day, that is how you fix tanking, but I think that's a big extreme to go to. Without teams having these chances to draft these top picks, franchises just have no hope. You can be the Washington Wizards, be the worst team in the league, and end up with the 14th pick. Can you imagine being a fan of a team? You watch the worst basketball team, you watch every game, and they're losing every game. Maybe not on purpose, but they're just a bad team. And they're the worst team in the league, and they end up with the 14th overall pick. I think this change would help eliminate tanking. This change also really hinders team building. I think this is more of like a last resort option. If nothing else works, maybe you resort to this. So I want to ask you guys, if your team had to choose between being bad for 2 years and drafting a superstar, or staying competitive but never contending, what would you pick? I think the choice is personally obvious. I understand tanking, but I also understand why it's bad. I'm a little indifferent on the changes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.